morning. Good morning, everybody. So nice to see you. If you're on the East Coast, I hope you're breathing okay. All right. Welcome to Daf Yomi Week in Review, Thursdays from My Jewish Learning. I get the pleasure of hosting a whole panel of wonderful teachers. And this morning we're joined by Rabbi Elliot Goldberg.
Good morning, everybody. I always start with good morning, and then I realize good morning for me and all of you in my time zone, and good what I fill in the part of the day that works for you wherever you are. Great to see so many of you to spend a little bit of time on a topic from this week in Masechet Gittin. We're gonna look at a number of cases that the rabbis deal with about delivery or creation or delivery of a get, of a divorce document. And step one will be we'll look at the case, and I'm going to ask all of you to throw into the chat what you think, what the status of the get is. Does it affect a divorce or not? We'll see what the crowd is. You can use your memory of reading if you've read it already in the text, or you could use your own logic to guess what's there. And then we'll talk a little bit about what the rabbis did with it. And I hope the collection of cases will raise some questions about what are the rabbis actually doing in this week's Gemara? What questions are they raising? What principles are they using to solve the problems that they suggest? And we'll see what we can learn about the rabbis and their thinking from these cases. So I hope that's clear. If it wasn't, you'll see as we go forward. I'm going to share my screen and bring up my slides. Here we go. It appears that it is working, at least on my screen. All right. Here we go.
Rabbi Goldberg, you want to drop a link in the chat or send one over to me? I'll drop it.
Oh, yes. I have to unshare my screen, I think, for a minute to do that.
Oh, sorry.
I could do that. Yeah, that's okay. Give us just 1 second for that's the wrong window. I have too many windows today. All right.
The case.
Yes. Here we go. Give me just a second. I'm copying the link. The link is copied. Let me go back to my Zoom screen. Here we go. All right. I'm putting the link in the chat. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. After that technical delay, here we go. I'm going back to sharing my screen. And I just want to make sure only people with access to anyone with the link. Now I'm giving you access. All right. And now here goes the slideshow. All right. So, here we go. Shmuel says, if a man gives his wife, I gave away that. If a man gives his wife a blank piece of paper and says to her, this is hereby your bill of divorce, then what do you think? Share in the chat. So if a man gives his wife a blank piece of paper and says, this is your bill of divorce, does that affect the divorce? What do you think? I got one response. Laura says not divorced. Someone who scrolled by says they're calling in from Atlanta. Ooh, I saw a specific question, but not specifically directed to her. But not specific for her, says Robert. Right, we know the divorce documents have to be written for her. Rob Plass says maybe it was written with invisible ink. I see some not divorce. Some more not divorce. The wife can write or get written and give it back. Ooh, the wife could actually use the piece of paper to write a divorce document of her own. That's a little bit of a different case that's here. Okay, we're seeing lots of different answers here. I'm gonna reveal the Gemara from this source. In this case, she is divorced, and actually, the reason why the rabbis say that in this case, if a man gives her a blank piece of paper and says, "This is your divorce document, this is your get," she's divorced because the rabbis suggest in this case she's divorced because, well, we accept the man's word that this is a divorce document. And why is it blank? Well, we're concerned about that. We think that potentially there was ink on the divorce document, but it faded. So someone in the chat had said invisible ink. So it's not that it's, I think it's more, it's not that invisible ink, and that, I don't know if you played with invisible ink as a kid. I think invisible ink, like you write it and then there's another substance you can use to reveal it, although the rabbis will talk about that in a moment. But here we're concerned that somehow the ink on the document has faded, and it was a document of divorce, even though now it doesn't look like a document of divorce, and therefore she's divorced. And now, and the rabbis, I see my friend and colleague Pamela Gottfried asked about, it says gallnuts in the chat. If you're asking about that, it's the ink that the rabbis say in the Gemara says it might be written with gall ink. Rachel and I did a little research right before you guys came online to confirm that this is gall ink is ink that's made from galls, which seem to be growths on trees that when processed produce some sort of ink, but then it fades. Oh, we're getting lots of good questions in the chat. I see you guys have been careful readers on Masechet Gitin. No witnesses, meaning the Gemara doesn't ask that, right? We know a get has to have witnesses. I'm assuming in this case where we say she's divorced, right? The husband says, "This is your divorce document." That is not just the text of the document that was faded, but also the signatures of the witnesses that was faded, and that allows him to deliver her the document. But I would agree that this particular case, in somewhat, to me, feels problematic in that, well, we're concerned that maybe the ink faded and that the husband is saying this is actually a document of divorce. Maybe he's just handing her a blank paper, and that allows him to give her a blank paper and effect a divorce without doing all the proper rituals that would make it legal. And I wonder what that means, but we'll circle back to that a little bit there. Ooh, that's what Philip just asked too. What if he gives her an intentionally blank page, right? And I'm going to circle back to the motivation of the husband and what might be happening here after we look at a couple other cases. So the next case is which the Gemara brings in part to contrast or to examine the first case. But here's another case. My mouse pad is very sensitive today. If the husband says to his wife, "This is hereby your bill of divorce," but instead of opening it up, she throws it into the sea, or into a fire, or into anything that destroys it. And then later he says, "Well, what I gave you wasn't really a bill of divorce. It was another type of document." So similar to the first case, the woman has a document that we're not sure what's on it, right? The husband says it's a bill of divorce. In case number one, the text faded. In case number two, the document was destroyed. But here in case number two, the husband sort of recants and says, "I gave you something else. It was official document, but it wasn't a bill of divorce." So what do you think is the case here? Is this divorced or not divorced? You can go back to the chat and weigh in. All right, we see a as before similar case, right? We rely on what the husband said he can't recant. We see so far divorced is winning. Valid if it was read by witnesses. All right, it's good. This is a great way to show some of the comments are showing you remember details from other part of Gittin. Right, Masechet Gittin has a lot of details, and the study of Masechet Gittin is actually in part of the training to become someone who writes, learns how to write a get. I'd like officially to do that today, so you might be there. Janine says, second case, I say divorce because it's important to prevent agunot. People who are, an agunah is a woman who is like stuck in a marriage where she's actually not married. And that we're going to circle back to that in a second. All right, last call to put your opinion into the chat. All right, I'm going to advance the slide. In this case, the rabbis say she is divorced. So here, similar to before, the husband said originally it was a get. The husband then recants, and similar to before, we can't tell because here the text has been destroyed. However, in the first case, right, the text sort of faded or was never there. If it was a blank document, we don't know. Here, before looking at the text, it's the woman who destroys the text. But in this case, she's divorced. And I would say in this case, some of the comments hinted towards this. There's a reason for us to accept the divorce later here, which doesn't necessarily have to do with the get. And it was hinted at by a few of your comments. The husband gave her the document of divorce, and there was a transfer, and it was as if there was a divorce, and she, for whatever reason, threw it into the sea or burned it. But then for some period of time, the husband and wife act as if they were divorced. And then later the husband recants. If we were to say they were still married, it's possible in the intervening time, she acted on the divorce and remarried. And then we have a situation where a woman thought she was divorced, got married, and then discovered she was still married, which puts her second marriage, right, or makes her second marriage adulterous. And if she's, depending on how much time has passed, if she's pregnant, it makes complications for the children and the family system. If this sounds intriguing to you, we have that coming in Masechet Gittin in later chapters to much detail this situation. But here's a sense where I think the rabbis are trying to protect the woman in that she acted right, everybody acted on the sense that this was actually a document. It was destroyed, so we have no way to prove it one way or another later. And in order to protect the post-trust status quo, post-divorce status quo, she remains divorced, even though the husband later comes and says, no, it wasn't really a get. In some way, we accept the fact that the get was a real get, and the husband would have to prove that it wasn't a get later, I think, and he doesn't have evidence to do that because the get has been destroyed, but she's divorced. Now, the rabbis in the Gemara wonder if this case is the basis for the other case, meaning here, and that there's some comparing and contrasting going on. Questions about, right, what happens with witness, you've raised some of the pieces. Do we need witnesses? Do we need, what kind of proof do we need? And that leads me to think, right, this is one of those times where we're dealing with not what the law should be, right, not lechatchila, before the fact, how we set up the law to make things work, but we're dealing with cases b'diavad after the fact. None of these things are ideal. Right, it's not ideal that the legal document is burnt. It's not ideal that the ink faded on the other document. And in these cases, we're sort of stuck. What do? We have to make a decision. And this second case, it seems to me, they're doing this to protect the woman and any steps she has taken, acting upon the fact that she is divorced before the husband comes and changes his mind, which doesn't strike me then that this is necessarily parallel to the other case, because the other case, like the document at the time it's delivered is blank. And the husband saying, well, this is your document of divorce, right? The time hasn't passed. So it might not be a direct parallel for me, in my eyes, between the two. Robert asked, why did she throw it away? The Gemara is silent about that. Don't know. It strikes me that, right, throwing it into the sea or into the fire has some, she didn't just lose it or set it aside. It strikes me that there's some, somehow this is how she's responding to the divorce. I'm not sure. Laura says in both cases, right, they seem to believe the husband, right, in the initial sense, right, the initial declaration that this is a divorce document that holds, right, and when we know that goes potentially in contrast, and some of you related some of the details. Some of the details that we're waiving some of the details to substantiate that the divorce is here. Thanks, Rob. You edited I think I have the right number on my other slides. This sugya is on 19b, not 17b. You are always a careful reader and listener, Rob. Thank you for catching that. See, I got my other slides.
You got a
wrong.
hand too, Rabbi Goldberg.
I got a hand. All right, I can't see the hand, so I'm going to unshare my.
I know, that's what I'm telling you.
Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen before the next case. Claudette, go ahead.
Rabbi, in this scenario, that he's giving her a blank piece of paper. This means that there were no witnesses and no scribe writing. I see a problem with that because any man could do something like that just if he's upset, and what is the woman takes it that she's divorced and she moves on. Or she says, no, I'm not accepting this blank paper, and she stays. What is her recourse?
That's a great question, right? It seems that in the original case, right, we're waiving some of the requirements, right? If in order for there to be a divorce, there are legal requirements, right? We need witnesses, we need a scribe. So the Gemara is hinting here that, right, but because the husband is saying this is your divorce document, there's a concern that, well, maybe it is, and maybe the ink has faded, and that it's not that there wasn't a scribe or there weren't witnesses, it's just, it's faded from that. And there's a potentially, right, the question comes up because it's problematic, right? Really, the question is what you're asking. Do we trust the husband to say this is a document that's been through the proper procedure, or not? And potentially the concern that that the ink has faded and that we can believe him is substantiated maybe in the second case, where we see a case where before the document can be examined, it's destroyed, and we believe the husband who says this is a document of divorce. Now, as I've thought about your question, preparing these sources for today, and here's some of my take on this. When you get into that mode of, well, is the husband really doing this right? Right. The question there becomes, has a husband fulfilled the technical requirements for writing a divorce document that make it legal or not, which is a legal question. I tend to think that here, when they're dealing with these unideal scenarios, the rabbis in part are thinking about what's the motivation of the husband and what's best for the woman. Meaning, if the husband says this is document of divorce, like, would he lie? Right? The suspicion is, would he lie, or did he skip a step? So maybe he's skipping a step. He didn't want to hire a scribe, right? He's doing it to save money. And then technically it's not a divorce document, but his intent is to divorce her. He hasn't followed the legal requirements. And potentially here, because there's a chance that he did and the ink faded, they'll accept it. The other thing that comes up for me is this question of, is this just a random act? Right, would a husband who's just angry for a minute take a piece of paper and say, here, lady, you're divorced?
That's what I'm worried about.
Right. And the husband could do that out of anger, right? And maybe that's the reason we have all these rules for how you get divorced, so that someone just doesn't do it spontaneously out of anger. And the rule, right, having all those steps, make sure this is really what you want to do. And in fact, in this week, I can't remember the specific place, but one of the rabbis said, right, there's a question about, just before this, the rabbis ask, like, the guy has a get that he writes, and then he's intending to deliver it to her, and then he changes his mind. And then he changes his mind to, like, can he use this document that's old? He wrote it last week when he thought he was being divorced, and then he wanted to get divorced, and then he held on to it, and he wants to use it again. And one of the rabbis says in response to that, well, people don't make the document of divorce till they're actually ready to do it. Like, you don't prepare. It's not in human nature to prepare it in advance. So and some of that says, in most cases, most people, which is what we follow when we make Jewish law, a husband's not going to take the trouble to make a get until he's really ready to he's really decided to divorce his wife. And the situation of, like, what if he's not really doing this or what if he doesn't really mean it, doesn't become a legal issue, because to go through all the steps, you have to really mean it, right? You write the get after you've decided. That's the rabbi's operating principle. What's difficult about this case, and I think you point to it really well here, is that, you're right on point that if it's really a blank document, he didn't go through all the steps, and then we don't know he's in that right set of mind, and then maybe he doesn't mean to divorce her, and then she's divorced and stuck there. And that's some of this conversation that continues, right? And I've selected some of the cases out of it. The Gemara weighs what you're saying in its discussion, right? Have there been witnesses who read the document before they signed it, before the ink faded? What else? What are the other markers that would tell us that this is potentially legitimate or not? And in fact, actually, the rabbis in the end contextualize it's Shmuel's statement, I believe, that first statement, by saying you can't just use a blank piece of paper. Like, the blank piece of paper, you have to treat it with some, say, chemical, but it's probably a natural substance that at least can determine if this paper once had ink written on it. So they can't, right? It's not like invisible ink that people said that you can put the whatever chemicals on it and the text restores itself. But you can put some liquid on it to draw out the ink to see if the ink has been absorbed into the paper. And if there was writing on it, that at least gives us a hint that maybe it was a legal document and it was okay for the husband to do it. So the rabbis don't let this stand, in part because of the objections that you said, to say, in all cases this is true. And some of that is because what you're saying, we want the husband to have to go through certain steps to make sure this is a real act, besides the fact that the Torah requires it. Anyways, that's a long-winded explanation to
Thank you.
Thank
you. It's
sure.
Just troubling to me.
Yeah, I get that. And some of these cases are troubling in that sense. And then in the second case, when the woman destroys the get, we have no chance. The difference there is some time goes by, and, like, the woman has potentially acted on her divorce, and the rabbis don't want to undo her divorce, because later, right? We don't know in the second case, did the husband give a get that wasn't really a get, like he says, or did he give a get and change his mind later because he was angry at her and wanted to punish her? We also don't really know what happened. In that sense, once the divorce happens, even though she destroyed the get before reading it, and maybe the husband raises a question, but we do accept it because time has passed, and we don't want to undo her status.
Thank you.
Thanks. Daf 18. All right. Gail and Rob have done some research. A person does not hasten a calamity upon himself, meaning you don't write your divorce document making you divorced, which is the calamity here, until you're sure you really want to do it. So thanks for that source and going back. You guys we have our own Google in the chat.
And I think there's discussion coming up about scribes who write fill in the blank gets. And is that allowed, or is it bad to have those hanging around, because that could also, Claudette, in response to your question, lead a husband to just fill in the blanks, gets it, like it can lead to an overly hasty divorce. There's a concern.
Yes.
About that.
Yes.
And also, I think there's a appreciation that this could be helpful if a husband suddenly has to go overseas and wants to give his wife a conditional divorce to prevent her from becoming an aguna. So I think we haven't had that discussion yet. I think it's coming up.
That's possible. I'm in the same time warp as you, Rachel, because I'm writing a couple weeks ahead. I'm a couple weeks ahead. I always the time warp of Daf Yomi with the highlights happens. Anyways,
We have just a few more minutes. Do you want to try and blast through your last text here?
yeah, I want to share this last piece. So I'm going to go back. Okay. I'm going to skip this one because I have two more texts, but I want to skip to the last one given time. It's always good when there are these questions, and this is a little more complicated. I had more than we had time for today. Here's here's a twist a little bit. I like this one. It's a good one to end with. I thought so. You can look at 19 and then into 20, and you could see a lot of these cases if you haven't read them already. This one I really like. There's a certain man, says the Gemara, enters the synagogue and took a Torah scroll and gave it to his wife and said to her, "This is your bill of divorce." That's the text. I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to stop the share. People are starting to vote in. Robert Starr says, not divorce, not specific. I love the logic behind this, right? The rules of divorce, the phrase that you have to write on a get is in the Torah. So if the husband says, here's a Torah, this is your get, is it a get? So we already see people saying not specific. And guess what? The Gemara goes back to our case of the gall water, right? The ink that's produced, right? The ink that maybe fades, and says, what if the husband took this Torah and brought it to a scribe and wrote on the outside of the parchment or the back of the parchment some of those details that aren't in those specific verses? Maybe we should be concerned that somewhere the scribe used fading ink on the Torah, and that makes it a get, which if we're going to accept the normal get, that's blank. Maybe we should apply that the same in this situation as well. And we already see lots of, and there are lots of ways this could be similar to the source that we started with. However, two things. First of all, I would say it's really expensive to create a Torah, especially in the rabbi's day. So the difference between a blank piece of parchment and a Torah as maybe it's a get, is whole different realms. And that might be reason to say if the husband is giving the wife a Torah, maybe it is really a get. Even, maybe there's a possibility it is, because why would he give it to her if it was nothing? Although, some of these cases, as Pamela says, are absurdist, and like the question, like, why would anyone do this? Like, we know that from the Gemara. Asking that a lot makes it hard to say. The rabbis conclude here, while there are lots of possibilities where maybe this could be a get, we're not concerned about it in the case of the Torah. Is a Torah scroll with faded ink kosher? Oh, Alan, that's a great question. Not about Gittin, but yeah, if letters or words from the Torah itself fade, the Torah you can't use for ritual purposes, and you have to fix that. What I learned about this, though, I don't know if the social historians will bear this out, is the rabbis say that somehow the parchment that the Torah is written on is treated with gall water before it's actually inscribed, and therefore you can't use gall water to write on it because it won't stick. Meaning, I don't know, something about the way in which they prepare the parchment for Torah makes it so this ink that fades can't be used. I'm not an expert in ancient inks to know enough about that. And I'm also know the Gemara says that. I'm an expert enough in the Gemara that says sometimes those things are factual and sometimes they're close, but not exactly. So it might need more research by people who are experts in ancient scribes. But the rabbis say, basically, it's not possible to write on the scroll with this ink that fades of the Torah because of the way it's produced, and therefore the Torah cannot be a get, and in this case, can't be divorced. Oh, I like Chaim's question, was the Torah his? It's much better that, right? Because now I'm imagining the scenario, they walk into synagogue, the husband goes up to the ark, takes out a Torah, hands it to his wife, and says, hey, hi, honey, here's a Torah. Now you're divorced, and leaves. I would assume, Chaim, in this case, it would have to be his Torah and not a public Torah. But I like that imagination of, what it would be if it's there. Anyways, lots of details today, lots of questions. There's a lot more here about this in these cases. I just want to say one last statement because I'm in 2 minutes past the end. I know, sorry about that. Some of what I think we see in these cases is the rabbi struggling not with just the technical issues, which we've seen that a lot in Masechet Gittin. What, right? Can you, when you have to write a get, what do you have to write it on? Does it have to be parchment? Can it be on like an olive leaf or the horn of a ox, or what's okay and what's not on the technical sense? But these cases today, while they have technical issues, they have to do with human intent. And we see cases today where the human intent and our interpretation of it sometimes overrides some of the technical pieces. Right? Shmuel starts with a statement that says a blank get. If someone gives a blank document and gives it to the woman, says, this is your get, they're divorced. And while the rabbis narrow that, they accept that. And that in some ways waves, it would strike me that the obvious answer is if the paper's blank, it's not a get. Even if there's writing on it before, once it fades, it's not a get. And like you have to make a new one. And if you really want to get divorced, you make a new one. The rabbis could say that it seems practical, but there's something here about the process of dissolving a marriage that it's not just the technical pieces, right? When the husband gives a document, can we believe him? And after the fact, do we not make the couple go through this again? Do we accept these statements or not? And it's that human element that enters into lots of cases in this week. And I like it when the rabbis address the human element, even though that sometimes, their human choices about the human element are not the same ones I would make. I like the notion that it's not always about the letter of the law. There are other factors here, especially divorce, which is like a difficult interpersonal thing. And there are ways that we take other factors into account. All right, that's that for today. Thanks for your great comments in the chat and questions. I loved what you guys added today. It made me think. Now I want to go back and study this again and do this one more time because you made me think deeper about it. So thanks.
Thank you. Well, Rabbi Goldberg, I think your idea of presenting a case and asking us to think about what might the rabbis have answered, that was a really interesting intellectual exercise. I think maybe we should do that some more.
Yeah,
that's instead of waiting to hear what they say, trying to imagine what they might say and why. I think that's a great exercise. So thanks for thinking of doing that today.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how to use. There's that quiz. There's that online game show website. Now I can't remember what it's called. Where you could set it up. We could do it like everyone gets points, and we'd have to do a special session to train on that technology. Anyways, that's for
about 1,000 tractates ago. We did a siyum as a quiz show. As an experiment. I think it was Shikalim, and it was kind of fun and different.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all for using that program. I forget what it's called too. Thank you all. Lovely to see you today. Hope you all are well. We'll see you in this space in another week and in your inbox tomorrow. Thank you, Rabbi Goldberg, and we'll see you all soon. Bye.
Oh, Kahoot. That's it. It's Kahoot.
Kahoot.